Hey, Reddit. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. I honestly never thought I'd be the guy posting here. But life has a way of humbling you, I guess. My name's Jack, and I'm 32. My wife, Emily, and I have been married for 6 years. We met in college. She was the kind of woman you couldn't help but notice. Smart, confident, and drop-dead gorgeous. I used to joke that I tricked her into marrying me, but deep down, I felt like the luckiest guy alive. We were the couple everyone envied, or so I thought. We have no kids, just us and our dog Cooper, in a cozy little home we saved up for together. Emily's in marketing and works long hours, while I'm a software engineer who's lucky enough to work remotely most days. You could say we had the perfect setup, or at least I thought we did. But recently things have been off. It's nothing huge, just small things that don't add up. Emily's been glued to her phone lately, which isn't her style. She's always been one of those "leave my phone anywhere" types, but now it's either in her hand or face down on the table, even during dinner. She's also started working late more often, which she says is because of a new project at work. I try not to overthink it because her job can be demanding. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It's hard to explain, but it's like an itch you can't scratch. I brought it up casually once, just asking if everything was okay at work, and she brushed it off with a laugh, saying I was overanalyzing things as usual. "You and your tech brain," she said. I laughed along, but the feeling didn't go away. Last week, she went out for drinks with her coworkers. Totally normal. Emily's always had a good relationship with her team. But when she came home, she was different. She smelled like a mix of cheap cologne and her usual floral perfume, and her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. She said she was just tired, gave me a quick peck on the cheek, and went straight to bed. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was imagining things. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm not. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not sure where this is going yet. Maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe everything's fine, and I just need to chill out. But I can't shake this feeling that there's more to the story. I guess I'm posting here because I need a place to vent, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there can help me figure out what to do next. Am I crazy for feeling like something's wrong? Or is this just part of marriage, little bumps that come and go? I don't know anymore. Okay, so I tried to take everyone's advice to heart: be calm, don't jump to conclusions, and talk to her when I feel the time is right. For a few days, I even convinced myself I was just overthinking everything. But life has a way of throwing curveballs at you when you least expect it. The day after I posted here, Emily mentioned she'd be working late again. "End of quarter madness," she said with a tired smile. She even kissed me on the forehead before heading out the door, which, weirdly enough, only made me more uneasy. Call it a gut feeling, but something about how she lingered at the door felt off. Like she was waiting for me to say something. I spent most of that night trying to distract myself. Played some games, took Cooper for a walk, and even started cleaning out the garage just to keep busy. But around 9 p.m., I couldn't help myself. I texted her, asking when she'd be home. 15 minutes later, I got a reply. "Running late. Don't wait up." Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but that message didn't sound like Emily. She's never been a big emoji person, let alone the type to throw in a heart at the end of a rush text. I stared at my phone for a long time, trying to decide if I should push further, but I let it go. For now. When she got home around midnight, she was all smiles and energy, completely different from the exhausted Emily who left for work that morning. "We crushed the presentation," she said, practically bouncing into the kitchen to grab a glass of wine. I wanted to be happy for her, but something about her cheerfulness felt forced? Manufactured? I don't know how to explain it. "Congrats," I said, trying to match her energy. "So, who was there? Did your boss love it?" "Oh, everyone was there," she replied quickly, not looking at me as she sipped her wine. "Even Brian, which was surprising because he usually skips these things. Brian is her direct manager, and yeah, he's known for being kind of flaky. But the way she mentioned him felt like a deflection, like she was throwing out names to distract me. Or maybe I'm just losing it. Sounds fun, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Wish I could have seen it. I'm sure you crushed it. She smiled at me, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation maybe, that made my stomach twist. You're sweet, she said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before heading upstairs. As soon as she was out of sight, I found myself pacing the kitchen, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but this wasn't Emily. She wasn't just acting differently, she was different. That night, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. Look, I know it's a breach of trust, but my mind was spinning, and I needed to know if I was losing it or if there was actually something to worry about. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, and Emily was fast asleep. My heart was pounding as I unlocked it. Thankfully, I knew her passcode. She told me months ago and never changed it. I scrolled through her messages first, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Same group chats, same random texts from her coworkers. I felt a tiny bit of relief, but it didn't last. When I opened her email app, I noticed an unfamiliar name in her inbox. Daniel. The subject line was just a smiley face, and the email itself was short. Same time next week? Let me know. No details, no context, but enough to set off alarm bells in my head. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake and demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. So, I took a screenshot of the email and sent it to myself. Then I put her phone back exactly where I found it, and climbed into bed, my mind racing. Who the hell is Daniel? And what does same time next week mean? I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Emily was as bright and chipper as ever. It was like she hadn't just come home late, left a vague email hanging over my head, and turned my brain into a whirlwind of doubt. She kissed me on the forehead before heading out the door, coffee in hand, like nothing was wrong. Me? I was spiraling. I spent the day obsessing over that email. Daniel. Who was he? A coworker? A friend I'd never heard of? Or something more? My logical brain kept telling me to stay calm. After all, one random email didn't mean anything. But the paranoid side of me, the side fueled by her recent changes, kept replaying it in my mind. To keep myself sane, I decided to dig. If there was nothing there, then fine, I'd feel like an idiot. But if there was, well, I wasn't going to sit back and let it unfold without understanding what I was dealing with. I started with social media. I searched her friends, her coworkers, and even dug through old photos to see if anyone named Daniel popped up. Nothing. Then I remembered her work directory, which she'd once shown me on her company's website. I scrolled through the list of names until I found him, Daniel H., marketing analyst. I clicked on his profile picture, expecting to see some middle-aged guy in a suit. Instead, I was staring at a younger guy, late 20s maybe, with sharp features, a tailored suit, and the kind of confident smirk that screams, "I think I'm better than you." My stomach twisted. I didn't want to overreact, so I told myself this was a coincidence. Maybe he was just a colleague she was working with on this big project. That would explain the email, right? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. Later that day, I called her at work under the guise of asking about dinner plans. She picked up on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Hey, babe. What's up?" "Not much," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Just wanted to see if you were in the mood for takeout tonight. Maybe that Thai place you like?" She paused. "Oh, I can't tonight. I actually have another late meeting. Brian's pushing us hard to wrap up this project." Brian again. The human scapegoat for every late night and work excuse lately. "No problem," I said casually. "Who's all working on it with you?" She hesitated for the briefest moment. "The usual team. Brian, Laura, and a couple of the newer guys." No mention of Daniel. "Sounds stressful," I said, biting back the urge to press harder. Don't overwork yourself, okay? I won't, she promised. Love you. She hung up, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I decided to take a page from my own playbook and use my tech skills to dig deeper. I set up a tracker on her laptop. Nothing invasive, just enough to monitor her emails and any messages she might send while she was logged into our shared Wi-Fi. It felt wrong, like I was crossing some ethical line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on. The first few days were uneventful. She sent the usual work emails, texted her coworkers about deadlines, and even looked up recipes for some pasta dish she wanted to try. I started to feel ridiculous, like I was the bad guy for not trusting her. Then, on Friday night, while she was working late again, I got my first hit. Her laptop pinged with a series of messages exchanged on a private app I'd never seen her use before. The sender? Daniel. Daniel. Tonight was incredible. I can't wait to see you again. Emily. Same. You're full of surprises, that's for sure. Daniel. Let's keep this between us, yeah? No need for anyone to get the wrong idea. Emily. Of course. Discretion is my specialty. My heart sank, but before I could read further, the messages stopped. I felt a mix of rage and confusion. What the hell was incredible? A meeting? A dinner? Or something else? And why the secrecy? Just as I was spiraling, my phone buzzed. It was Emily calling me. Hey. I answered, my voice shaky. Hey, babe. I'm on my way home. Sorry it's so late. Did everything go okay? I asked, trying to sound normal. Yeah, just a lot of boring paperwork. I'll be home in 20. As I hung up, my mind raced. 20 minutes wasn't enough time to process everything, but it was long enough for me to decide one thing. I needed to see her reaction. When she walked through the door, I played it cool. How was work? I asked as she kicked off her heels and flopped onto the couch. Exhausting, she said, rubbing her temples. I swear, if I have to spend another late night with Brian. Brian. Again. I just nodded, biting my tongue. I didn't want to tip my hand too soon. Not yet. But one thing was becoming painfully clear. Something, or someone, was in the shadows, and I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the truth. The weekend rolled around, and Emily's usual rhythm seemed to fall back into place. We spent Saturday morning at the dog park with Cooper, laughing as he chased squirrels like his life depended on it. She was her usual self, light-hearted, playful, even affectionate. It was almost enough to make me forget the messages from Daniel. Almost. By Sunday, I was still turning everything over in my mind. Should I confront her? Should I wait? Should I keep gathering evidence? Every option felt like the wrong one. Then, something happened that threw me completely off balance. We were sitting on the couch that afternoon, Emily scrolling on her phone while I absent-mindedly watched TV. The doorbell rang, and Cooper bolted to the door, barking like the house was under attack. I got up to answer it, expecting maybe a package delivery or one of the neighborhood kids selling cookies. Instead, I found myself face to face with a man I didn't recognize. Hey, he said, smiling awkwardly. He was tall, lean, with dark hair and sharp eyes. He looked to be in his late 20s. Sorry to bother you. I'm looking for Emily. I froze. Who's asking? I said, keeping my voice steady but firm. Oh, right. He stammered, glancing down at his shoes. I'm Daniel. I work with her on the marketing team. She left some documents at the office, and I figured I'd drop them off on my way home. He held up a manila envelope, his expression friendly but nervous. Daniel. Daniel. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Before I could process what was happening, Emily appeared behind me. Oh, Daniel, she said, her voice cheerful but with an edge of surprise. I didn't expect you to go out of your way. You could have just emailed me. It's no problem, he replied, handing her the envelope. Figured it'd be faster this way. Didn't mean to interrupt your weekend. You're not interrupting, she said quickly, glancing at me. Thanks for dropping it off. No problem, he said, giving me a polite nod. Nice to meet you, by the way. I've heard a lot about you. That last line caught me off guard. Heard a lot about me? From Emily? What exactly had she been saying? I forced a smile. Likewise. Daniel left as quickly as he'd arrived, and Emily shut the door, clutching the envelope a little too tightly. Well, that was unexpected, she said with a nervous laugh, heading toward the kitchen. What's in the envelope? I asked, following her. Just some contracts we're working on, she replied casually, setting it on the counter without opening it. No big deal. Something about her tone set me on edge, but I didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, I spent the rest of the day in a fog, replaying the interaction in my mind. Daniel had seemed normal enough, polite even, but there was something about the way Emily had reacted to him that didn't sit right. Later that night, after Emily went to bed, I couldn't resist the urge to check the envelope. Quietly, I slipped into the kitchen and opened it, expecting to find the contracts she'd mentioned. But the envelope was empty. No contracts, no documents. Nothing. My heart started pounding as a wave of unease washed over me. Why would Daniel drop off an empty envelope? Why would Emily lie about it? The pieces weren't adding up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was going on between them was deeper than I'd realized. And for the first time, I wondered, was Daniel just a coworker, or was he the key to a secret I wasn't supposed to uncover? The empty envelope haunted me all night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Emily slept peacefully beside me. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers, but I knew that would only make me look unhinged. If I wanted the truth, I needed to be smarter. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. Over breakfast, Emily was scrolling through her phone like always, humming softly to herself. Daniel seems like a nice guy, I said casually, sipping my coffee. She froze for a split second, so quick it might have been imperceptible to someone who didn't know her as well as I did. Then she smiled. Yeah, he's great, she said too brightly. Really talented. He's been a huge help on this project. What's he like to work with? I asked, feigning curiosity. She shrugged, her focus shifting back to her phone. Hard-working. Kind of a perfectionist, but in a good way. Why? No reason, I said, keeping my tone light. Just wondering about the people you spend all these late nights with. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Don't worry, it's all boring work stuff. You'd hate it. I let the conversation drop, but her reaction told me more than her words ever could. She was hiding something, of that, I was certain. That afternoon, I decided to take a bold step. I'd remembered Daniel's last name from the company directory, so I did a little social media digging. His profiles were locked down pretty tight, but I managed to find his Instagram. The account was private, but his profile picture was recent, a selfie in front of a sleek downtown building. What caught my attention was the caption. Late nights aren't so bad when the company's good. #grind mode. The post was from 3 days ago, the same night Emily had come home late, smelling like cheap cologne. My stomach twisted, but I didn't have solid proof yet. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, unable to focus on anything. Cooper must have picked up on my mood because he followed me around the house, his big brown eyes full of concern. I scratched his ears absent-mindedly, grateful for his silent companionship. When Emily came home that evening, I was determined to stay composed. She walked through the door with her usual energy, planting a kiss on my cheek before heading to the kitchen. "How was your day?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of water. "Good," I said, trying to sound normal. "Just worked on some code and took Cooper for a walk." "You?" Same old, she replied, leaning against the counter. "Brian's driving everyone crazy, as usual." Brian. Again. The poor guy was carrying the blame for every late night and awkward moment. I decided to push a little further. "Oh, by the way, I checked the envelope Daniel dropped off. It was empty. Any idea what that was about?" Her hand froze midair, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. Empty? She said, forcing a laugh. That's weird. Must have been a mix-up. I'll ask him about it tomorrow. You sure there's nothing I should know? I asked, keeping my tone light but letting the question hang. She blinked, her smile faltering for a split second before she recovered. Of course not. It's just work, babe. You're overthinking things again. She kissed me on the cheek and walked away, leaving me standing there, fists clenched at my sides. Later that night, as she showered, I checked her laptop again. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate for clarity. There were no new messages from Daniel on the private app, but I did find a draft email she'd started earlier that day and hadn't sent yet. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" The body was short but chilling. Daniel, I think we're pushing our luck. Let's keep a low profile for now. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The email confirmed what I'd suspected. There was more to their relationship than she was letting on. But what? And why did it feel like every answer just raised more questions? I copied the email and closed her laptop, my mind racing. Emily was hiding something, and whatever it was big enough for her to start worrying about being caught. The question was, how much longer could she keep up the act before the cracks in her story shattered completely? The day after finding that unsent email, I decided I needed a break from the house to clear my head. I took Cooper for a long walk through the park, hoping some fresh air might help me think straight. It didn't. Every step was heavy with questions. Emily's secrecy. Daniel's envelope. The draft email. It was like a bad movie I couldn't stop watching. When I got home, something unexpected was waiting for me. A handwritten note slipped under our front door. It was folded neatly, the edges crisp, and my name, Jack, was scrawled on the front in shaky handwriting. My stomach churned as I picked it up and unfolded it. The message was short but enough to send my world spiraling. Your wife isn't who you think she is. Ask her about Thursday nights. No signature. No explanation. Just those cryptic words staring back at me like a taunt. I read it 3 more times, trying to make sense of it. Thursday nights? What about them? Emily had been coming home late more often recently, but Thursday didn't stand out. At least, not until now. I scanned the street, hoping to catch sight of whoever had left the note, but the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. With my heart racing, I went inside and set the note on the kitchen counter, staring at it like it might explode. I didn't have time to process it before Emily walked through the door, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, carrying a grocery bag. Hey, babe, she said cheerfully. Thought I'd grab some stuff for dinner. I'm feeling spaghetti tonight, sound good? I nodded, barely able to focus. Yeah, sounds great. As she unpacked the groceries, I watched her carefully, looking for any sign of unease. She seemed completely normal, humming softly as she put a loaf of bread on the counter. Busy day at work? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled. Not too bad. Just the usual chaos. Why? No reason, I said, glancing at the note on the counter. Her eyes followed mine, and for a split second, her expression changed, just a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Guilt? What's that? She asked casually, gesturing to the note. Someone left it under the door, I said, my tone neutral. Any idea what it means? She walked over, picked it up, and read it. Her face didn't betray much, but her grip on the paper tightened. That's weird, she said, laughing nervously. Probably some prank or scam. You know how people are these days. Maybe, I said, studying her reaction. But why would they single you out? I don't know, Jack, she snapped, her tone sharper than I expected. People are crazy. Let's not make a big deal out of it. She crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash, ending the conversation before I could push further. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her reaction. She was deflecting, hard. But why? What was it about Thursday nights that had someone leaving anonymous notes at my door? As I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for the truth to fall into my lap. If Emily wasn't going to tell me what was going on, I'd have to find out for myself. The next day, I called my buddy Marcus, a retired private investigator who owed me a favor. "Jack, this isn't like you," Marcus said after I explained the situation. "You sure you want to go down this road?" "I don't have a choice," I said. "I need to know what's going on. Can you help me?" He sighed. "All right. I'll tail her this Thursday. But, Jack, be prepared for whatever I find." Thursday came faster than I expected. That evening, Emily got ready for another late meeting, dressed in a fitted blazer and heels that seemed overkill for a work session. "You look nice," I said as she kissed me goodbye. "Thanks," she said with a smile. "Don't wait up, okay?" As soon as she left, I texted Marcus. "She's on the move." Hours passed, each minute dragging slower than the last. Around midnight, Marcus called me. "She just left the place," he said, his voice low. "You're going to want to see this." "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I'll send you the address. Meet me there in 30. When I arrived, Marcus was waiting in his car outside a dimly lit building. It wasn't an office or a restaurant, it was a private club. The kind of place with blacked-out windows and a members-only sign above the door. "She was here for 2 hours," Marcus said, handing me his camera. I scrolled through the photos, my hands shaking. There was Emily, laughing with Daniel, her hand resting lightly on his arm. But it wasn't just the two of them. They were sitting with a group of people, all dressed to the nines, sharing drinks and smiles like old friends. "What the hell is this?" I muttered. Marcus shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine. But whatever it is, it's not a work meeting." Before I could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the club, and out stepped 2 men in suits, carrying a briefcase. They disappeared inside without a word. "Jack," Marcus said, his tone grave, "I think this goes deeper than you realize." I didn't know what to think. Was this some kind of secret social club? A business deal? Or something darker? One thing was certain. The Emily I thought I knew was a stranger, and I was about to follow her down a rabbit hole I might not come back from. I barely slept after that night. The photos Marcus had shown me were seared into my brain. Emily, Danielle, the group of well-dressed strangers, the SUV. Nothing about it made sense. This wasn't just an affair, if it even was one. This felt bigger, darker, and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, I couldn't look at Emily without replaying everything in my mind. She acted completely normal, humming to herself as she buttered toast, while I was unraveling inside. "Big plans today?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Not really," she said, sipping her coffee. "Might stop by the store after work, but that's it." "Why?" "Just curious," I said, watching her carefully. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're being weird, you know that?" "Am I?" I said, forcing a laugh. She shrugged and went back to her breakfast, leaving me wondering how she could be so calm when everything about her life seemed so off. After she left for work, I called Marcus. "Any idea what kind of club that was?" I asked, pacing the kitchen. "Not exactly," he said. "But I did some digging. The place isn't listed anywhere, no public records, no website, nothing. It's like it doesn't exist. But I've seen setups like this before." "What do you mean?" "It could be anything," Marcus said. "Private investor meetings, underground poker games, or worse. The kind of place where people go to make deals they don't want on the books." "Worse?" I echoed, my chest tightening. "Yeah," he said grimly. "Think money laundering, illicit trades, or, well, you get the picture." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You're saying Emily's involved in that?" "I'm saying I don't know," Marcus replied. "But whatever it is, it's not normal." I spent the rest of the day glued to my laptop, searching for any information I could find about the club. I combed through real estate records, forums, even local crime reports, but the place was a ghost. No mentions, no rumors, nothing. By evening, I was no closer to answers, and my frustration was boiling over. When Emily got home, I decided to test her again. "How was work?" I asked as she walked through the door. "Busy," she said, kicking off her heels. "We're finally wrapping up that project, though, so things should calm down soon. Any more late nights planned?" She paused, her hand frozen mid-reach for a glass. "Not that I know of." "Why?" "No reason," I said, shrugging. She gave me a strange look but didn't press further. That night, after she fell asleep, I made another move. I'd remembered something from Marcus's photos, a logo on the SUV that had pulled up to the club. It was subtle, just a small emblem on the side door, but distinctive. I took out my phone and zoomed in on the image Marcus had sent me. The logo was a stylized letter, V, surrounded by an intricate design. I had no idea what it meant, but it felt important. I ran a reverse image search, hoping for a lead, and after a few dead ends I hit something, a vague mention of a Vanguard circle, in an old article about exclusive networking groups. The article described it as an invite-only organization for high-powered individuals looking to strike private deals. The kind of group where discretion was more valuable than money. Emily wasn't high-powered. She wasn't rich, or at least I didn't think so. So why the hell would she be there? Before I could dig deeper, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus again. "Jack," he said, his tone urgent. "I've been keeping an eye on that club. Another SUV pulled up tonight, same logo. But this time, a guy got out with a duffel bag and walked in. I waited until he left and tailed him. He dropped the bag off at a bank downtown, one of those private vault places." "What was in it?" I asked, my voice tight. "I couldn't get close enough to see," Marcus said. "But whatever it was, he didn't look like someone dropping off grandma's jewelry." My head spun as I tried to connect the dots. Emily, Daniel, the club, the SUVs, the duffel bag. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to solve. "Should I confront her?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Not yet," Marcus said firmly. "You need more. If this is what I think it is, you're walking into a hornet's nest. Be careful, Jack." I hung up, my mind racing. The next day, I made up an excuse to work at a cafe near Emily's office. I wanted to see if Daniel was around, or if there was anything unusual about her workday. Around lunchtime, I spotted her leaving with a group of coworkers, including Daniel. They walked to a nearby restaurant, laughing and chatting like everything was normal. But then, about halfway through the meal, Emily and Daniel slipped out the back, leaving the others behind. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding. They walked a few blocks and disappeared into another building, this one with no sign, just a security camera above the door. I waited for over an hour, but they didn't come out. What the hell was going on? And more importantly, how much longer could I keep this up before everything exploded? I didn't confront Emily that night. Instead, I let her come home like nothing had happened, her smile as bright as ever, while I pretended everything was fine. It wasn't. The building she and Daniel had entered that afternoon was burned into my mind. No sign, no markings, just that single security camera watching over a sleek black door. It screamed secrecy, and the fact that Emily had slipped away from her coworkers to go there only added to the growing weight in my chest. The next morning, I called Marcus. "I need to know what's in that building," I said. Marcus sighed. "Jack, this is getting messy. You sure you want to keep digging?" "I don't have a choice," I replied. "She's hiding something. I can't just sit back and wait for the pieces to fall into place." After a long pause, he said, "All right. Give me the address. I'll see what I can find." While Marcus worked his magic, I spent the day going over everything I'd learned so far. The notes, the messages, the club, the SUVs, the duffel bag. It was all connected somehow, but the picture was still too blurry to make sense of. That evening, Marcus called me back. "The building's registered to a shell company," he said. "Standard stuff, fake names, dead-end paperwork. But get this, The property is insured by the same group that insures that private club you mentioned. I gripped the phone tighter. So they're connected? Seems like it, Marcus said. But here's the kicker. The company has ties to a series of private vaults, places where people store things they don't want the IRS or law enforcement knowing about. Money, art, documents, even, well, other things. Other things? I asked, my stomach turning. Use your imagination, Marcus said grimly. The kind of stuff that makes people disappear. My blood ran cold. Emily? My Emily? Was she mixed up in something like that? I didn't want to believe it, but every piece of evidence was pointing me further away from the woman I thought I knew. Do you want me to stake it out? Marcus asked. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say yes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was getting dangerously close to something I wasn't ready to face. Not yet, I said finally. But keep an eye on the club. If anything else happens, I want to know. The next day, Emily left for work as usual, kissing me goodbye and promising to be home early for dinner. I smiled and waved, but as soon as she was gone, I grabbed my keys and headed to the building she and Daniel had entered. I parked a block away and waited, my pulse racing as I watched the door. For hours, nothing happened. No one went in or out, and the street was eerily quiet. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of the car and walked toward the building, my heart hammering in my chest. The security camera above the door tracked my movement, its lens glinting in the sunlight. I pressed the buzzer beside the door, half expecting no one to answer. To my surprise, a voice crackled through the intercom. Name? I froze. Name? What name? Before I could respond, the voice spoke again, more impatient this time. If you don't have an appointment, I suggest you leave. The intercom clicked off, and the camera turned away, dismissing me as if I didn't exist. Frustrated, I returned to my car and sat there, staring at the building. Whatever was inside, it wasn't meant for people like me. That night, I tried to act normal as Emily and I ate dinner together. She seemed relaxed, laughing at some story about her boss's latest screw-up, while I could barely focus on the words coming out of her mouth. Everything okay? She asked, giving me a curious look. Yeah, I said quickly. Just tired. Work's been a lot lately. She nodded sympathetically, but I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Doubt, maybe? Suspicion? After dinner, she went to bed early, leaving me alone in the living room. I stared at my phone, debating whether to call Marcus again. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. You're getting too close. Back off if you know what's good for you. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. Someone knew I was watching. Someone didn't want me to find out the truth. And whoever they were willing to scare me into silence. The message replayed in my mind 100 times as I sat frozen on the couch. You're getting too close. Back off if you know what's good for you. Who had sent it? How did they know I was digging? Was it Daniel? Someone at the club? Or worse, was it Emily? I wanted to call Marcus immediately, but something stopped me. If someone knew I was investigating, that meant they were watching. Every step I took now had to be calculated. After a restless night, I called Marcus the next morning anyway, keeping my voice low as I stepped out into the backyard. I got a text, I said, my voice shaking. Someone knows I'm looking into this. What did it say? Marcus asked, his tone immediately sharp. They told me to back off. No name, no details, just a warning. Marcus let out a low whistle. That's not good. Whoever sent that is serious, Jack. This isn't some bored office gossip you're chasing. You might be poking at something a lot bigger than you thought. What should I do? There was a pause. Lay low for now. Stop digging, at least publicly. If they're watching, they'll want to see you back off. Give it a few days, and I'll see if I can trace the number that texted you. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay. But if anything else happens, call me immediately. Marcus finished. And Jack? Watch your back. I spent the next few days trying to act normal. I went about my work, walked Cooper, and even managed to sit through a movie with Emily without my stomach twisting into knots. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Meanwhile, Marcus updated me in small, cryptic bursts. He was still staking out the club, and while nothing major had happened, he said the SUVs were making regular appearances. But then, on Thursday night, another one of Emily's late meetings. Things escalated. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a photo. It was Emily. She was sitting at a table in what looked like a dimly lit lounge, her back to the camera. Across from her was Daniel, leaning forward with a smirk on his face. The timestamp showed it had been taken just moments ago. Before I could react, another text came through. Do you see now? I stared at the photo, my hands trembling. Whoever sent this was following Emily. Watching her. But why send it to me? Were they trying to help? Or was this another warning? Without thinking, I called Marcus. I just got a photo of Emily and Daniel. I blurted out. Someone's following them. What? From who? Marcus asked, alarmed. I don't know, I said, pacing the kitchen. Same number as before. They're sitting in some lounge or club, but I don't recognize it. Send me the picture, Marcus said. I forwarded it to him, my mind racing. A few minutes later, Marcus called back. That's the club, he said grimly. The one she was at before. Same layout, same furniture. Jack, whoever sent you that photo is in the middle of this. They're not just watching, you've somehow gotten tangled in their game. What the hell do I do? I asked, my voice cracking. Stay put, Marcus said firmly. Do not go to that club. If someone's sending you these photos, they either want you to know the truth or they're setting you up. Either way, walking into that place right now would be suicide. I hung up, staring at the photo again. My mind was a storm of questions. Who was sending these messages? Why was Emily with Daniel at that club again? And most importantly, what the hell was going on behind those blacked-out windows? Just then, I heard the front door creak open. Emily walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She smiled when she saw me, but there was something in her eyes, something almost smug. Long day? I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Exhausting, she said, setting her purse on the counter. Brian's driving us all insane with last-minute changes. Brian. The mythical scapegoat of her every late night. You should relax, I said, watching her carefully. You've been working so hard lately. She smiled and leaned in to kiss me, but as she did, I caught a faint scent, something sharp and unfamiliar. Not her usual floral perfume. Thanks, babe, she said, heading upstairs. As soon as she was out of sight, I checked my phone again. The photo of her and Daniel stared back at me, a stark contrast to the story she just spun about Brian and deadlines. Whatever was going on, one thing was clear, Emily wasn't just lying. She was playing a game. And now so was I. I couldn't take it anymore. Emily's lies, the cryptic messages, the picture of her with Daniel, it was all driving me insane. I needed answers. That's how I found myself parked outside the club the next night, my heart pounding as I stared at its blacked-out windows. Marcus's voice echoed in my head. Do not go to that club. But the truth was, I didn't care. If there was even a shred of a chance I could figure out what Emily was hiding, I had to take it. I watched the entrance for hours, waiting for a break in the silence. Around midnight, a sleek black SUV pulled up, and two men in suits stepped out, carrying a metal briefcase. They knocked once on the door, exchanged a few words with someone inside, and disappeared. I waited a few minutes, then got out of my car and walked toward the door. The security camera swiveled toward me as I approached. Name? The voice over the intercom asked. I hesitated, my mind racing. I didn't have a name, didn't have an appointment, but I knew one thing, Daniel's name carried weight here. Daniel, I said, my voice steady. There was a pause, and I held my breath. The door clicked open. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the low hum of conversation. The room was dimly lit, with plush leather chairs arranged in small clusters. Men in suits and women in evening gowns sipped expensive drinks, their laughter low and conspiratorial. No one even glanced my way as I stepped inside, which was both a relief and unsettling. I scanned the room, my pulse racing, until my eyes landed on her. Emily. She was sitting at a table in the corner, laughing with Daniel and another man I didn't recognize, a heavy-set guy with a graying beard and an air of authority. I moved closer, keeping to the shadows, until I was just a few feet away. "You're sure it'll go through?" the bearded man asked, his voice low but firm. "It's all lined up," Daniel replied smoothly. "We've got everything we need. Just waiting on her final approval." My stomach churned. Her? Did he mean Emily? She smiled, but it wasn't the smile I knew. It was colder, sharper, like she was someone else entirely. "Don't worry," she said. "I always deliver." I clenched my fists, my mind racing. What the hell were they talking about? Before I could move closer, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. "Lost friend?" a deep voice growled. I turned to see a tall man in a black suit, his expression unreadable. "Just waiting for someone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't look convinced. "This is a private club. If you're not supposed to be here, you need to leave. Now." I nodded, backing away, but my mind was still spinning. What had I just walked into? And what was Emily's role in it? As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I started toward my car, but before I could reach it, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Marcus. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his eyes darting toward the club. "I needed to see it for myself," I said. "Emily's in there. She's with Daniel, and they're talking about some kind of deal." Marcus cursed under his breath. "You don't get it, do you? You're in way over your head. This isn't just an affair or some shady business deal. These people don't play by the rules, Jack. You're lucky they didn't drag you out of their feet first." "What are they doing?" I demanded, my voice rising. "What's she involved in?" Marcus hesitated, then grabbed my arm and pulled me further into the shadows. "I didn't want to tell you this until I was sure," he said, his voice low. "But that club? It's part of a network. They deal in black market trades, art, jewels, offshore accounts. And sometimes, people." I stared at him, my blood running cold. "You're saying Emily—" "I don't know." Marcus cut me off. "But whatever she's doing, it's not innocent. And if you keep pushing, you're going to get both of us killed." I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could speak, my phone buzzed. It was another message from the unknown number. "You've seen enough. Stop now, or you'll regret it." I showed Marcus the screen, my hands shaking. "They're watching me," I said. "They're watching both of us," Marcus corrected. "You need to go home, Jack. Pretend like you never saw anything. Whatever Emily's wrapped up in, it's bigger than you." But as I drove home, one thought kept playing in my mind. What if Emily wasn't just wrapped up in this? What if she was this? I parked outside the house and stared at the windows, the warm glow of the lights inside mocking me. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was a stranger. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever know the truth without destroying myself in the process. The moment I stepped inside the house, I felt the weight of what I'd seen and heard bearing down on me. Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up and smiled at me like nothing had happened. "You're home late," she said, setting her phone down. "Work stuff?" "Yeah," I muttered, forcing a smile. "Just needed some air after a long day." She nodded and went back to her phone, but I couldn't stop staring at her. The woman in front of me was the same person I'd fallen in love with years ago, or at least, she looked like her. But after what I'd seen at the club, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real Emily was someone I didn't know at all. The next morning, I called Marcus. "I'm not stopping," I said before he could even speak. Marcus sighed heavily. Jack, I get it. But you need to understand, if you go down this road, there's no turning back. I'm already in it, I said. What have you found? Fine, he said reluctantly. After you left the club last night, I stuck around. There's definitely something big happening there. High-level deals, people coming and going in unmarked cars. But here's the kicker, Daniel and Emily left together, and they didn't go home. My stomach twisted. Where did they go? They went to a hotel downtown, Marcus said. Room 614. I got a few photos of them going inside. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Together? Are you sure? Yes, Jack, Marcus said firmly. Whatever excuse she's been feeding you about work, it's a lie. She's meeting him outside of the club, too. And judging by their body language, it's not just business. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. Send me the photos. A few minutes later, the pictures came through. My chest tightened as I stared at them. There she was, Emily, walking into the hotel lobby with Daniel. She was smiling, her hand brushing against his arm as they passed the front desk. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She was cheating on me. But the cheating wasn't even the worst part. It was the lies, the secrecy, the fact that she was tied up in something so much bigger than an affair. Do you want me to keep following her? Marcus asked. No, I said, my voice hollow. I'll handle it from here. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, replaying every moment from the past few months. Every late night, every excuse, every time she brushed off my questions. It all made sense now. That evening, I decided to confront her. When Emily walked through the door, she looked as calm and composed as ever. Hey, she said, setting her purse down. What's for dinner? We need to talk, I said, my voice steady but firm. She froze for a moment, then gave me a wary smile. What about? About where you were last night, I said, holding up my phone with the photos Marcus had sent me. Her face went pale. Jack, I can explain. Explain what? I snapped, cutting her off. That you're sneaking off to hotels with Daniel? That you've been lying to me for months? What part of this am I supposed to believe? Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying it. It's not what you think, she said, her voice trembling. Then tell me, I demanded. Tell me what the hell is going on. Why are you meeting him? Why are you at that club? What are you hiding from me, Emily? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she couldn't decide what to say. Finally, she took a deep breath. It's complicated, she said. Try me, I said coldly. She hesitated, then finally started to speak. I've been working with Daniel, she said slowly. But it's not just business. There's something else. I felt my chest tighten. What does that mean? It's not about us, she said quickly, her words tumbling out. It's about the club. The deals. I can't explain everything, but I'm in deep, Jack. And I didn't mean for you to find out like this. You didn't mean for me to find out you were sleeping with him? I spat. Her eyes widened. No, it's not like that. Don't lie to me, Emily, I shouted, my anger boiling over. I've seen the photos. I know what you're doing. You betrayed me. She stared at me, her face crumbling, and for a moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth. But instead, she turned and walked away, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood there, my fists clenched, feeling more lost and betrayed than ever. Whatever Emily was involved in, it wasn't over. And neither was I. Emily stayed locked in the bedroom for hours. I sat in the living room, trying to process everything. The photos of her with Daniel at the hotel, the lies, the club, it all pointed to one undeniable fact. My wife had been living a double life, and I was just starting to uncover how deep it went. Eventually, the door creaked open. Emily stepped out, her face pale and puffy from crying. She didn't look at me as she sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I need you to listen, she said quietly, her voice shaky. I've been listening for months, Emily, I said coldly. All I've heard are lies. I know, she whispered, her head bowed. And I'm sorry. But you need to understand, this isn't just about us. It's not just about you and me or even Daniel. I stared at her, my chest tight. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been cheating on me while playing some kind of dangerous game. She winced but didn't deny it. Daniel and we got close, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It started months ago. At first, it was just about work. But then, she stopped, her words catching in her throat. Then what? I pressed, my voice rising. We got involved in something bigger, she said finally, her eyes meeting mine. Something dangerous. And I didn't know how to get out. What are you talking about? I asked, my frustration mounting. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. The club, she said. It's not just a social scene. It's a front. They deal in illegal trades, art, artifacts, offshore accounts, and sometimes people. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're working with them? I asked, my voice shaking. I didn't have a choice, she said, her voice breaking. It started with Daniel. He recruited me, said I could make connections that would help my career. But once I was in, I couldn't get out. They control everything, Jack. They know everything. And if you try to leave... She stopped, her face pale. They threaten you. I finished for her, my mind racing. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Is that why they've been watching me? I asked, my voice sharp. Because I started asking questions? Yes, she whispered. I tried to keep you out of it, but you kept digging. They noticed. They don't like it when people get too close. I stood up, pacing the room, my thoughts spinning out of control. So what now? Do they think I'm a threat? They think you're a liability, she said quietly. And if you don't stop. Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. I sat back down, my anger boiling over. Emily, you didn't just lie to me. You put me in danger. You dragged me into this without even telling me the truth. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, her voice muffled. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? I snapped. By sneaking around with Daniel and lying to my face every night? She looked up, her eyes filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Jack. I never wanted you to find out like this. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to get out. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the weight of her confession hanging heavy in the air. Finally, I stood up, my jaw tight. If you want me to believe you're sorry, then you need to start telling me everything. No more half-truths, no more lies. I need the whole story. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, she said softly. I'll tell you everything. And as she began to speak, I realized the nightmare was only just beginning. Emily took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as if trying to steady herself. Her voice wavered as she began to speak, each word a weight that pressed down harder on me. It started 6 months ago, she said. Daniel approached me at work. He said he noticed my performance, that I had potential to move up in ways the company couldn't offer. At first, I thought it was just networking, one of those exclusive groups where people make connections. He talked about opportunities, deals, and money. It sounded too good to be true. Because it was. I muttered, my fists clenching. She nodded, her eyes downcast. I didn't realize how deep it went until I was already in. The club is a front for something much darker. They connect powerful people, CEOs, politicians, even criminals, with others who have what they want. Art, property, access, and sometimes, people. People? I repeated, my stomach turning. She hesitated, then nodded. Trafficking. It's not just about money. They move things, and people, across borders, no questions asked. My blood ran cold as the gravity of her words sank in. So why are you involved? I demanded, my voice sharp. At first, it was just small favors. she said, her voice trembling. Passing along information, making introductions. They paid me well, too well. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to know. But then Daniel started pulling me into bigger things. Meetings at the club, deals that felt off. And once I realized what was really happening, it was too late to back out. Why not? I asked, my frustration mounting. They make sure you can't, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. They record everything, conversations, meetings, even the things you don't think matter. They hold it over you, make sure you know that if you leave or cross them, they'll ruin you. Or worse. I stared at her, my mind racing. And Daniel? What's his role in all of this? He's one of their recruiters, she said. He finds people like me, people who can help them, who won't ask questions. He's charming, persuasive, and completely ruthless. Were you sleeping with him? I asked, my voice cold. She flinched but didn't look away. I never wanted to, she said quietly. But he knew how to push me. He used the club, the threats, the money, everything. I made mistakes, Jack. I let it go too far. Her words were like a knife to the chest, but I forced myself to stay focused. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me what was happening? I was scared, she admitted. Scared of what they'd do to you if they thought you knew. Scared of losing everything. Newsflash, Emily, you already have, I said bitterly. She broke down, tears streaming down her face as she buried her head in her hands. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. What do they want now? I asked, my voice hard. What's the deal you're working on with Daniel? She hesitated, then looked up at me, her face pale. It's big, she said. They're moving someone, next week. I don't know all the details, but it's happening at the club. Daniel says it's the kind of deal that could make or break their entire operation. And you're part of it? Yes, she whispered. They want me there. I'm supposed to smooth things over with the buyer. I stared at her, the pieces finally clicking into place. The threats, the meetings, the lies, it all came back to the club and this deal. Then that's where we ended, I said, my voice firm. Her eyes widened. Jack, you don't understand. These people are dangerous. If they even suspect you're trying to stop them. I don't care, I interrupted. This ends now, Emily. I'm not letting you drag me, or anyone else, any deeper into this. She started to protest, but I held up a hand. I'll handle it, I said. You've done enough. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. As she went upstairs, I grabbed my phone and called Marcus. It's time, I said. We're taking them down. What's the play? Marcus asked, his tone sharp. We crashed the deal, I said, my voice hard. Whatever they're planning at that club next week, we're going to stop it. And we're going to make sure they pay. There was a pause, then Marcus said, You realize what you're walking into, right? This isn't just some affair or a shady business deal. These people will kill you if they think you're a threat. I know, I said. But I'm done being scared. Let's do this. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. I wasn't walking away until I got the truth and justice. The night of the deal came faster than I expected. Marcus and I had spent days preparing, mapping out every angle, every possible scenario. He had contacts, ex-military types who owed him favors, and they'd agreed to back us up if things got ugly. Emily was unusually quiet as she left for the club that night. She hadn't asked about my plans, and I didn't offer any explanations. There was an unspoken understanding between us. Whatever happened tonight would change everything. Once she was gone, I grabbed the gear Marcus had given me, an earpiece, a small hidden camera, and a burner phone, and headed to the rendezvous point. Marcus and his team were already waiting in an unmarked van a few blocks from the club. You ready for this? Marcus asked, his face grim. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, sliding the earpiece into place. The plan was simple, infiltrate the club, gather evidence of the deal, and disrupt it before it could go through. We didn't have enough resources to bring the entire operation down, but if we could stop this deal, it would send a message. As I approached the club, my heart pounded in my chest. The door opened without a word this time, and I stepped inside, trying to blend into the crowd. The room was alive with tension, the air thick with smoke and murmured conversations. In the corner, I spotted Emily. She was sitting with Daniel and a group of men, her posture rigid but her smile practiced. She looked stunning in a black dress, her hair perfectly styled, and completely unrecognizable to me. I moved closer, careful to keep to the shadows. Marcus's voice crackled in my earpiece. She's with him. 2:00. I see them. I whispered. As I watched, one of the men handed Daniel a briefcase. He opened it slightly, just enough for me to glimpse stacks of cash and what looked like a folder of documents. This is it, I said. They're making the handoff. Get closer, Marcus said. We need audio. I slipped into the crowd, inching closer to their table. Emily's voice reached my ears, light and flirtatious. You're getting the best, she said with a laugh. Daniel and I make sure of that. My stomach turned at the way she said Daniel and I. One of the men leaned forward, his voice low. And if there are any complications? There won't be, Daniel said confidently. Emily's handled it all. She's our ace. Emily smiled, leaning closer to him. Her hand brushed against his arm, and he smirked, placing his hand over hers. I froze, my heart sinking. It wasn't just business. It was them, together. Before I could react, Marcus's voice cut through my earpiece. Jack, we've got company. 2 SUVs just pulled up. Heavily armed. The words barely registered as I stared at Emily and Daniel, watching her laugh at something he whispered in her ear. She looked at him the way she used to look at me. I couldn't breathe. They're onto us, Marcus said urgently. We need to abort. Now. But I didn't move. Jack? Marcus's voice grew louder. Get out of there. Instead, I stepped forward, my anger boiling over. Enjoying yourself? I said loudly, my voice cutting through the low hum of the room. Emily's head snapped toward me, her face a mask of shock and fear. Jack, she said, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? Daniel stood up, his expression darkening. You shouldn't be here, he said, his tone low and menacing. No, I shouldn't, I said, glaring at Emily. But I had to see it for myself. The lies. The cheating. The betrayal. All of it. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. This isn't what you think, Emily said, standing up. Her voice cracked, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew the truth was out. Don't lie to me again, I said, my voice rising. I know about the deals. I know about Daniel. And I know you've been sleeping with him. The color drained from her face. Jack, please. Don't, I snapped. You don't get to plead with me after everything you've done. You've been lying to me for months, maybe longer. You betrayed me, Emily. You destroyed everything we had. Daniel stepped between us, his posture threatening. That's enough, he said. Before I could respond, the door burst open, and chaos erupted. Marcus's team stormed in, armed and shouting commands. The crowd scattered, tables overturning as people fled. Emily screamed as Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back exit. Let her go! I shouted, lunging toward them. One of Marcus's men tackled Daniel, sending him crashing to the ground. The briefcase spilled open, papers and cash scattering across the floor. Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror as I approached her. It's over, I said coldly. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't want this, Jack, she whispered. I didn't want any of this. But you chose it, I said, my voice hard. You chose him. You chose the lies. And now you have to live with it. The authorities arrived moments later, Marcus's team handing over the evidence we'd collected. Daniel was arrested, along with several others from the club. Emily wasn't taken in, but her life as she knew it was over. I walked away that night, leaving her behind as she cried, begging me to forgive her. But I couldn't. She'd destroyed our marriage, our trust, and everything I thought we'd built together. And now, it was time to rebuild my life, without her.